Let's get into it. Soul Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. I'm standing up. I gotta be standing up. The chair. I'm in a hotel right now. I'm in Arkansas. No, I was in Arkansas. Now I'm in Memphis. The hotel just doesn't have the proper seating. So we're standing up, and I like it better anyway. Got my dad's shirt on. Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan. Now, Jordan Peterson, what he's doing in this clip is something that he's done before. When he got attacked online, he started talking about the need for people's identities to be revealed online, which is a very slippery slope, a very bad place to be, because it's the precursor, knowing who someone is. Perfect example, the UK, when they know who you are and you say certain things, they come and get you. That's what Jordan Peterson was advocating for on X. Now he's advocating for something else. And it's very interesting because it's the wording. And I love Jordan Peterson, but I have to call this out. The wording that he's using of psychopaths, the way that he is trying to position this, the way that he is trying to gaslight Joe Rogan into talking about putting up guardrails towards guests. It goes right in line with what Douglas Murray was saying. I'm going to play the clip, and then we're going to talk about it some more. I got another Jordan Peterson clip after that to play because this is something that he's been going into a little bit. Very disheartening. I still love Jordan Peterson, but you got to call this out. This is absolute nonsense that he's talking about. Let's get into it.
That's partly why people don't like losing face, for example,
right,
because their emotions dysregulate. Okay, so now the best way to play that game is to establish a genuine reputation. And the best way to do that, you've done this, by the way. I figured out this year in my lectures that I'm always trying to answer a question on stage. So that's a quest. And I'm bringing the audience along on a quest. And it's a real quest because I'm actually trying to figure something out. And I do that in real time. And that's a very different game. That's a very different conversational game than the status battle game.
Yes.
Right? Because I could come on here, I don't know if it would work, but I could come on here and I could try to show that I was smarter than Joe Rogan. Now, I've watched you, and that's a very difficult thing to pull off. But hypothetically, that could be my aim, and I could play gotcha questions, and I could lead you into places.
The problem is that wouldn't work because I'm willing to accept that you're smarter than me. First of all, I talk to a lot of people that are smarter than me, and I like it. It's enjoyable. I don't ever feel uncomfortable talking to people that are smarter than me.
Yeah.
I want to know some things that they can tell me on certain things. I want to educate myself. I want to see how their mind works. I want to be blown away. I don't want to compete with them intellectually. There's times in my life where I would have fallen into that trap.
Yeah.
I think that's what's trap,
made. Well, I think that's also what's made you popular and a force for good, is that you are on a quest, and that quest, the consequence of that quest, if undertaken properly, is reputational enhancement. And people who can't or won't do that, they default to power games, and the part of it, and that's the default to power.
Right.
But it's worsened with social media.
Absolutely.
Because if you meet someone and they're playing a power game with you, you can just decide not to have anything to do with them anymore, or you can put a stop to it if you need to. But on social media, you can't, because they're distant from you, and they're often also anonymous. And so they can play power games to enhance their reputational status falsely with no consequences. And the social media is rife with that. And it's really a problem. Like, I think that virtualization has enabled the psychopaths.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, well.
Without a doubt.
That's a terrible thing, because the psychopathic types, they're always the death of everything. Like, I'm seeing this come up on the right now. So imagine this. I've been working on a new theory of political psychopathology, and I like it quite a lot.
Is this where the term the woke right comes in?
Yeah, well, Lindsay is pointing at that, but he hasn't got the diagnosis exactly right. So it isn't woke. That's not the issue. It's not exactly.
I think
one
what
level.
they're talking about is like similar types of behavior.
He is talking about that. Yeah, no. What he's pointing.
Woke just lets you clarify in your head. Oh, it's like that.
Yeah, but the problem is.
It's like Antifa.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is that argument is predicated on the claim that the ideas are the problem, like the woke ideas, for example, on the right or the left. But that's not the problem. The problem is that 4 to 5% of the population, something like that, is cluster B, that's the DSM-5 terms, histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, psychopathic, or they have dark tetrad traits. They're Machiavellian, they're sadistic. That's about 4%. Okay, so the question is, how do these people maneuver? And the answer is they go to where the power is, and they adopt those ideas and they put themselves even on the forefront of that.
Right.
But the ideas are completely irrelevant.
Right.
All they're doing is they're the Pharisees. They're the modern version of the Pharisees. They're the people who use God's name in vain, right? As they proclaim moral virtue.
Yes.
Doesn't matter whether it's right or left or Christian or Jewish or Islam. They invade the idea space and then they use those ideas as false weapons to advance their narcissistic advantage.
Yes.
And so then you have the problem, and the right's going to face this more and more particularly, because the left had to face it when they were in powers.
Yes.
How do you identify the psychopathic parasites, 4% of the population, who are clothed in your clothing and waving your flags, but who are only in it for narcissistic benefit? You know, the people who studied the dark triad, these were people who originally studied psychopaths, and they moved into ordinary personality, so to speak, on the fringes. It showed that the non-criminal psychopaths, so the fringe cases, are Machiavellian. They use their language to manipulate. They're narcissistic. They want unearned reputation. That's what a narcissist wants. And they're psychopathic, which makes them predators or parasites. Okay, that's pretty bad, those three things. But they had to expand the nomenclature after a while because they found that they were also sadistic, which implied that if you're Machiavellian and narcissistic and psychopathic, you develop a sufficiently bad view of your fellow man that their undeserved pain is a source of pleasure to you. And that's what's being enabled online.
Yes.
Like, see, because we've evolved real specific mechanisms to keep such things under control in face-to-face interaction. Lack of anonymity, for example, within a community. Psychopaths in the real world, they wander. They have to move from place to place because people can figure out who they are, and they're held responsible. They're particularly held responsible by men. But online, they escape from that. They escape from that protective. They escape from that system of constraints, and they have free reign, and they can find other people like them very rapidly, and they can gang together. Yeah. And so this is like, I can really see this starting to happen on the right. Like, I've been tracking psychopathic behavior on the right for probably 4 years, something like that, especially on the anti-Semitic side, because that's really where it reared its head first. And
why is that?
There's nothing more annoying than a successful minority. Right. Now, that's part of it. And I'm going to, I must get myself in trouble right away, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
this is a third rail subject.
Well, so, yeah, it's a, yeah.
But who, see, as he says that, who is it annoying to? Because is he calling out other men like himself? Like white guys? Is he calling out white guys and saying, oh, you're just annoyed? Because, you know, when you say a successful minority, you're obviously not pointing, you can't be saying the people who are annoyed are black people or any other race or group. So you have to be pointing at the largest one. It's just very odd. Why do that? Right? Especially as he's talking about the woke right, to point at the same people that and let's just say the woke right is a real term. I don't think it's real, but to point at the exact same people that the woke left would point at as you're trying to explain what it is and remove yourself from being involved in it. There's a lot going on, and you really have to, again, I watch Joe Rogan so much, I watch the clips so much, so obviously I'm going to catch on to it, maybe before somebody else, maybe you've already caught on to it, but this is very odd. He's doing the thing that he is accusing these psychopaths of. It's very odd. Very, very odd. Let's keep going.
Yeah, it's a real terrible subject.
It's interesting because if you don't criticize it enough, you're compromised. If you criticize, you know, it's like when it comes to anti-Semitism, like it's one of those things where you can't separate. It's a religion, and it's also a race, and it's also a government. Mm-hmm. That's where things get weird.
Right.
And then there's also the concept of intelligence agencies and compromise that also gets attached to it, the manipulation of world markets and money, and there's a lot to unpack. And then there's regular Jewish people have nothing to do with that.
Well, the Jews, too, they're very successful.
Yeah.
And so what you would expect from a purely statistical point of view is you'd expect them to be overrepresented at the extremes.
They're also a walled garden, right?
Meaning?
Meaning it's very difficult to join. They don't proselytize. They don't try to get you to join.
Right.
And they're all very tightly knit. They call themselves the clan. They're all like locked in. The Jewish clan, not KKK. The problem with that term has been compromised by the Ku Klux Klan. But I mean it as terms of tribe.
Well, community.
Yeah, community. They're very tight knit in that regard. They stick together. Well, and if you understand the history, obviously, of Nazi Germany and of persecution in Eastern Europe, you have to. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, all these complex things are multidimensional. I mean, I watched your whole conversation with Douglas, and I thought you guys did a very credible job, all three of you, of navigating unbelievably choppy waters. So that's the first thing I'd like to say, because one of the things I was trying to figure out when I was watching that is, do I think I could have done a better job of any of you? And I certainly didn't walk away from it with that idea in mind. But then underneath all that, I thought
I just have to say really quickly, the fact that he's saying that out of Douglas, Dave Smith, and Joe Rogan, that he thought they all did a good job of navigating choppy waters, when Douglas was clearly just arrogant and felt like he knew everything from the jump. The people he was talking about, he felt like he didn't even have to take their content in. He thought that Ian Carroll was a comedian. He thought Douglas was a comedian. He thought Daryl was a comedian. He just refused to take in what they were saying, but then talked all about them. And then was kind of trying to scold Dave Smith and scold Joe Rogan. And Jordan Peterson saying that they all did a good job of navigating choppy water. I find that very odd. Well, listen, my own bias. I did a video saying he's the worst guest in JRE history. Okay, fine. I'm biased there. I can see that. But the fact that someone like Jordan can't see that at all, can't see the arrogance, the fact that Douglas didn't do that well, he can't see that at all, that's very odd to me. Very odd to me. Now, you should have put on your tinfoil Speedo already, okay? That should have happened already. You should have done that. And that makes me feel like maybe this guy is co-opted in some kind of way. And again, I'm going to do more clips on Jordan Peterson in this podcast. I'm going to talk about how great certain things he says was. Me and my wife really connected while listening to it when they were talking about marriage. And we talked about our own marriage. It was great. So I'm not throwing out Jordan Peterson completely. But when I hear that, I go, really? You're on that guy's side. Joe Rogan's your friend. You're on that guy's side in regards to that. And I know he's not really taking a side, but even just to say that Douglas did a good job in that performance, you kind of are not outrightly taking a side. Do you know what I mean? For you to be friends with Joe Rogan, for you to know Dave Smith, to be friends with Douglas, or just know Douglas, and then to say that they all did a good job. That's kind of like a both sides type of thing. When people are like, oh, well, both sides. Well, both sides, because they don't want to take a side. I don't know. Let's keep going.
There's a really unbelievably tricky problem here, and I think that's why it's made it poked up into, well, you also set that conversation up, but it poked up and made itself manifest in that conversation. And the issue is, how do you identify the psychopathic pretenders? And it's even worse now, and then make a barrier, right? Now, the right was calling for the left to do that for decades, and they didn't, and they couldn't, and the left is not good at drawing barriers, partly temperamentally. The right is somewhat better, but there's no shortage of monstrosity there. And so then the question is, how do you draw the line? And that's kind of what I was, because I've been watching these right-wing, they're not right-wing, these psychopathic types manipulate the edge of the conservative movement for their own gain. And a lot of that's cloaked in anti-Semitic guys. There's plenty of anti-Semitism on the left too, by the way. So it's not unique to the right.
Well, but particularly now.
Yes, particularly now. And so, you've let your curiosity guide you, your curiosity and your desire for knowledge, this quest, you've let that guide you as a podcaster. And by the way, I'm trying to work through exactly the same sort of thing. How do you know, given your radical increase in stature over the last 10 years, how do you know when your curiosity and even your skepticism about the fact that things aren't the way that people say they are, because that's certainly been demonstrated in the last 10 years, how should anyone decide what guardrails to put up? Like, what do you look for? Do you have a conceptual system worked out for that? Like, Because,
what do you mean? In what way?
well,
How do I look for in terms of people to talk to?
yeah,
How do I look for
because
subjects
you
to
have
talk
this
about?
insanely immense platform,
Yeah.
and you're inviting people onto it. And, you know, you said to Douglas, and I know this to be true, that you're not really thinking about the outcome exactly. You're thinking about, this is an interesting person to talk to, and I'd
Yes.
like to go on that quest. But then you have the additional conundrum. We're trying to work this out in the Daily Wire side of things too. Not to say that that's exactly the same situation. It's like, once you gain in reach and authority, then how do you know that? How do you take great care that the people you're talking to aren't, what would you say, eliciting or feeding a subculture? Yeah, that's right. That hasn't got the proper aims. Like,
See, this is the thing. This is where it becomes, this is what he's doing right now. Joe Rogan doesn't have that conundrum, but yet Jordan Peterson is positioning it as though he does, and that Joe Rogan has to now answer that. Okay? Joe Rogan only has what he talked about at the first part, which was that he enjoys talking to people he's interested in talking to. That's it. That other part is not a conundrum. Maybe on the Daily Wire side, like you said, maybe they have that issue and they fire the people they have issues with, obviously. But Joe Rogan doesn't have that issue. If he doesn't like someone, he doesn't talk to them. If he thinks somebody is, you know, a con artist, and maybe he talks to them, he doesn't show the episode. He did that once with Randall Carlson. He brought someone on, and Joe didn't think the guy was on the up and up. They never released the episode. That's all Joe does. And the thing about it is, and this is why, again, tinfoil Speedo, but Jordan knows this. He's known Joe for years. He watches the podcast like everyone else, and he actually has personal conversations with him. So for him to be saying, how do you stop having people on that are feeding a subculture that doesn't have the proper aims? He knows that's not a thing Joe deals with. It's a thing that he feels, that Douglas feels, that Sam Harris feels, and various other people have talked about in trying to silence Joe Rogan. It hasn't just come up now. It happened all through 2020. People were trying to figure out, how do we get this guy to stop talking to people that we feel might, because listen to me right now. Jordan Peterson is saying it very eloquently, as he does, feeding a subculture that doesn't have the proper aims. Let me simplify that for you. Talking to people who might give people ideas that could possibly be true. How do you stop from doing that, Joe? Now that I've positioned it like that, think about what he's saying. He's just talking about Joe talking to people who might have ideas that people might go, that kind of makes sense. I'm going to look into that. That was Joe all of 2020, 2021, 2022. And the world, and for sure America, was much better off because he didn't have those type of guardrails up. He didn't worry about subcultures. But now all of a sudden he should worry about subcultures. And Jordan Peterson coming in now with no book to sell. Jordan always pops up when there's a book to sell. Pops up when there's no book to sell. After Douglas Murray, this is all a setup. And I know, you're going to be like, what are you talking about? I watch this show too closely to not realize that this is a setup. Douglas was on, and that was a setup to push Joe into the realm of, you should have more experts around. Sam Harris just a week before Douglas Murray. Now Jordan Peterson on talking about the exact same things. This is like a setup. Something's going on. I don't know what. I don't know what's happening behind closed doors. This is a setup. And there's people who look like they're Joe's friends, but they're actually working for some kind of other entity that is working these people like ventriloquist dummies, like sock puppets. And sadly, it seems like Jordan might be one of them. Because again, he knows how Joe Rogan's podcast works. This has never come up before. Feeding a subculture that doesn't have the proper aims is exactly what Douglas Murray said when he was talking with Dave Smith, saying you should be careful what you talk about because you never know what will bubble up underneath you. You don't know who will come after you because of what you're saying. But again, these are just these posh, very intellectual ways of saying you shouldn't talk about certain things because people might get ideas. This is exactly what the mainstream media does. This is exactly what they did throughout 2020 and the years after that. It's exactly what they've been doing to Joe for the longest time. This is what they do. It's so apparent to me. Just that term. Just think about that term. I wrote it down because it just stood out so much. That's exactly what Douglas Murray was saying. Feeding a subculture that doesn't have the proper aims. Who decides? Who has the proper? How could you decide who you're going to talk to? And then when you're thinking about them, you have to think about a subculture that could possibly bubble up underneath them, and then also know that subculture's aims. How could you possibly be able to build up a guardrail system for something like that? You would have to turn into the mainstream media. You would have to censor yourself heavily. You would have to not have people on that you're interested in having on and have people on who you are allowed to have on. You would become a gatekeeper of yourself. You would become, like I said, you'd be self-censoring. That is not what Joe Rogan's podcast is about. That's not what any podcast should be about. And again, it's sad when Jordan Peterson's the one saying this stuff. He was doing it before when he got attacked and he couldn't handle it. His daughter was doing it as well. Now he's back on the podcast and he's still talking like this. And it's so disheartening. It's so disheartening. I really hope that you guys can see it. There's like 20 seconds left. I'll play it for you.
I guess the legacy media probably worked that out by having people, mediators, right? And guests. And that was also back when we could rely on the structures of authority in some sense to filter. And now we're in this helter-skelter world where everything is
the
up
legacy
for
media
grabs.
is the worst at that now.
Yeah, I know.
They're the worst
I
at
know.
that, which is fascinating. You know, it really is. It's really fascinating when you lose faith in a New York Times piece.
So that was just the last part that Jordan Peterson had to say. But even just going back into the people I'm talking about, Sam Harris says we need standards when he's talking about Joe Rogan's podcast. Douglas Murray says you need more experts around. And now Jordan Peterson is on saying, what are the guardrails that you put up to stop from feeding subcultures that possibly don't have the proper aim? And I will add this as well. What he's doing with the word psychopaths, that's what people do with conspiracy theorists. That's what they do with tinfoil hats, tinfoil people. This is a term that he is using to discredit people. Now, I know, of course, we've all ran into people online where you're like, wow, if that's a real person, wow, I can't believe that's how their mind works and that they're willing to say these things. And I know, of course, I know that to be true. But what he's doing is he's lumping in that little avatar that I just created that we all have known and seen, and he's lumping all these other people into it. It's the same way that you can look at someone who's a legit researcher, who's a legit journalist, who's saying something that's off the beaten path from the other journalists, and somehow he gets thrown in line with people who are into hollow earth and lizard people. It's like those two things don't belong together. It's like somebody, myself, I've studied the payment path of the the Soros Foundation all the way down to little things that they pay for that they're not seen paying for. That's legit research. But you don't get to call that tinfoil. That's not tinfoil. That's not me making it up. It's not a theory. I have the paper. I can see the paper trail. Jordan is taking that word and he's trying to create this avatar. And then he's putting all these things that this avatar does. And like the term conspiracy theorists, it's used for people who don't agree with what you're saying. People who are not on the side of everything that you're on the side of. It's a discrediting method that he's using. And I'll just end it with saying the way that you see these people, because he was saying, how do you 4% of people, they are going for power, these like psychopaths that he's talking about. They co-opt movements. I'm breaking it down. He says it in much more eloquently, much more wordy. But basically he's saying they co-opt movements. That's what he's saying. They work their way into movements. That's when he's talking about the fringe part of the Conservative Party. They work their way, they co-opt movements. We've seen it with BLM, seen it with a bunch of different things. They work their way in. How do you know who's done that, who hasn't? I'll tell you how. You wait and you watch. I've been watching Jordan Peterson for 10 years. Sometimes it takes that long. I've been watching various people who are talking heads, political pundits, whatever you want to call it. You watch them for a long time. And then suddenly something like this happens and you go, oh, that's weird. You saw it with a bunch of different people when Tucker Carlson went to interview Putin, and all of a sudden he's not a real journalist. You're seeing it now with Jordan Peterson doing this whole thing and leaving Joe with this look on his face. The way that you find these people is you watch. You don't shun them. You don't brand them with certain names. You don't discredit them. You watch. You allow them to speak, and you just watch. You know how many people that he's talking about that I've watched? Nick, all these different people that I've watched over the years, and I go, all these people are pushing. They're pushing no marriage. They're pushing no kids. They're pushing regular men are losers. They're pushing you need Bugattis. They're pushing materialism. They're not really pushing religion, although they're saying they're converting to religions, but they're not really pushing anything biblical. No scripture involved in their life. They're not married. They don't have kids. You just watch for a while. And you start to figure out, oh, okay. This is not something to be believed in. This is not something to watch. That's what you got to do. You don't pool them into one term and then throw that whole thing out. And anyone who dare focus on that or ask what's in that little bubble you just threw out, you brand them as the same thing and shun them out as well. That's what the left does. Anyways, guys, standing up this episode. I hope you guys are able to understand. I wish I could have went live with this so I could have actually conversed with people more. But I'm just traveling right now. The Wi-Fi is terrible in these hotel rooms, so I just felt like going live just wouldn't work. I might give it a try when I'm in a better place. I think I'll be in Nashville soon. I think there's going to be a really good hotel there or something. We'll see. But I hope you guys understand what I'm saying, because it's slippery. It's the same thing I said when Jordan Peterson was asking for the unmasking of people online. It's like what you're doing is you're asking for ID. You're trying to make everybody who's anonymous have to have their name. And it's like, yeah, there's benefits to that, but there's also a slippery slope to it. And the same thing here. He's trying, and watch this. Again, talking about watching and just looking and watching. Watch that term that he brought up come up more and more and more now. Right now, we're seeing the woke right pop up more and more and more. And we're going to start seeing psychopaths pop up more and more and more. And watch what they attach those names to. Watch the things, the wars, the conflicts. Watch what they attach them to. And that's how you'll know. It's BS. Anyways, I'm out.